In this video, we are going to solve this exercise on closure. Write a function outer that takes an input string. Inside the function outer, define another function expression named sayHello, which alerts the input. SayHello should be called immediately after it is defined. So we'll go ahead, create a function named outer, and here it accepts one input. So we'll say input, just name it str. It will be a string. Inside that we need to define another function called, so we have to define a function expression. So we'll say let's say hello is equal to function, and what it does, it alerts the message. So we'll say alert str. sayHello should be called immediately after it is defined. So we'll go ahead and call sayHello. So this is what we needed to do. Moving forward, write a function called delay. So we'll go ahead, create a function called delay that accepts two arguments. So it is going to accept two arguments, a callback function. So we'll name it CB and wait for the time in millisecond. So I'll just call it ms. So that is the time we have to wait. Delay should return a function. So it needs to return a function. So we'll say return function. And what that function is going to do, let's see that. When that function invokes, it waits for a specified amount of time before executing the callback. So we need to execute the callback after this amount of milliseconds. So for that, we are going to use set timeout. And here, set timeout accepts two parameters, a callback function and the time it has to wait, and that is ms. So this is what it should do. So let's go ahead and test it. So let's go ahead and test it. So here we are going to execute this code. And in set timeout, we are going to call delay. In delay, I have to pass a callback function. Here we are going to say console.log hello. And here we are just going to say after 2000 milliseconds, it means 2 seconds. So it is going to return another function. And that function, when called, will be executed after 2 seconds. So we'll store it into return. We'll store it into time and we'll call time. So after 2 seconds, we should see the output hello, and that is working properly. So our delay function is also done. Write a function with closure. The first function should only take one argument, someone's last name. So the first function is going to take one argument, that is last name. So we'll call it ln, that is last name, and return a inner function. So we just have to return another function. So we'll say return function. Now let's understand what it is. So the returned inner function should take one more argument. So it is going to take another argument, that is first name. And when inner function called, it should console log the value of both first name and last name with a space. So I'm just going to say console log. Here we're going to say first name and last name with a space. So last name is ln and first name is fn. So in this way we are done. Let's go ahead and test this code. So we define the function. Now last name Lee, whenever we are going to call, it's going to call Brett Lee. Similarly, last name Lee, if we call this function again with another name, say for example we call it with Sean, press enter, it will become Sean Lee because the Lee is being added here from the outer function. This function is useful in case you want to create name for multiple people with same last name. So you can create something like last name Lee and call it with Jane Lee and Lian Lee. Create a function called storywriter that returns an object. So how I generally go about writing function is whatever being asked, I start doing that. So return an object. So I'm going to return an object with two methods. One method is called addWord. So addWord is a function. So I'm just going to make it a function. Similarly, so addWord is a function that adds a word to your story and returns the story, while the other one, erase. So we have another function called erase. That is another function. Resets the story back to the empty. So now it is going to add a word. So how we are going to add a word? We'll have a story here. So story will be empty, and that is where we are going to add whenever you're going to add any word. So this will accept the word or the paragraph, and we just have to store it into story. So we'll say story plus equal to word. And here we can see whenever you are adding it, it is also returning the value that you are adding. So here we just need to, at last, we just need to say return story. Similarly, erase will erase the story. So it will say story is equal to empty. So this is like erasing, and at last we'll say return story. So this is what the function should look like. Let's just go ahead and execute it. So this function is done. The first thing we have to do is create the farm love story. So now if you look at farm love story, how about doing dir to it? Because we can look it internally. So here we can see it is an object. It has two functions, add word and erase. So let's just use add word, execute it, and we see the output 2 times when we are doing it. If we do it 3 times, we'll get it 3 times. How about doing erase? So when we do it erase, sorry, there is spelling mistake. The function named is erase here, and here it is e. Just save it. So let us call this function, and here we can see the value became empty. Now if we add one word again, it will become one word. So in this way we have created a function that can create story for us. Let's just execute it again just to check if it is working properly or not. It is erased. So it is working properly. Create a function named forEach that accepts one parameter, an array. Inside the function forEach, there is a variable named index. So let's just go ahead and do that. So we have a function called forEach that accepts one parameter, that is array. Here we have a variable called index that is initialized to 0. Now when forEach function is called, it returns another function. So we have to return another function. So we'll say function, we have to return this. When the return function is called, it returns the element from the array at specific index. So we have the array, we have the index. What we need to return from here? We just need to say return array of index. Every time you call the return function, the value of index should increment. So first what we can do is return the value and increment the value of index. So that can be easily done by saying index plus plus. So index will be used, and then we are just incrementing the value of index from 0 to 1. So in this way this function is done. Let's just go ahead, execute this function, saying unexpected identifier. There is spelling mistake for the function. So now let's just copy it, paste it again. We have forEach function. So we'll copy this, paste it here. So we have forEach function. Let's go ahead and test it. So first thing we will do is create a next function. Now let's go ahead and call next. So it's saying next is not a function. Okay, because here we are not calling it with the value forEach. So let's go ahead and test it. Let's look at next now. So when we call it, we get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then we will get undefined because there's only 5 values here. So in this way, we were able to implement for each kind of a loop, but this time we are using closer to do that. Create a function named add designation, which accepts a title and returns another function. So accepts a title and we need to return another function. So we'll say function and we need to return this. The return function accepts a string, that is prefix. So we'll say prefix, and returns prefix and title with a space. So we'll just say the same. We'll just use the ternary operator to add these two things. So we'll say title. First is prefix, followed by a space and title. So in this way, we'll be able to use designation in the closer. So we are saying sales is equal to as designation salesman. So let's just go ahead and test this code. Now, if you call sales, because it has already have a salesman, we can prefix it with something like top. So it become top salesman. Something like failed. So it become failed salesman. Similarly, we can do it with the manager. So we can create the function and we can say there are two managers, head manager and regional manager. Create a function called change salary. So we have created the function which accepts a current salary. So it's going to accept a current salary and returns an object with 3 methods. So we are going to return an object with 3 methods. First one is raise. So that is going to be a function. Similarly, we are going to add another lower. That is also going to be a function. You can directly write it like this. You don't have to write it with a function because this is a shortcut for writing function inside an object. If you're getting confused, this is what it is. You have an object. So I can say let obj is equal to an object. Here you can just say add is a function and that function does something. So this is one way of writing it. Another way of writing it is like you can just say add and you can do it like this. This is also a function. So this is just a shortcut way of writing a function inside object. So raise, lower, last is current. So raise will add 500 to current salary and return the updated salary. So here we have current salary. So we'll say return current salary plus 500. Similarly, here we'll say return current salary minus 500. Here we'll say return current salary. Let us go ahead and test this. So the function is done. We'll paste it here. Now we need to call these two functions here. So we are doing the salary for Sam. And what I want to do is I want to sam.raise. So if you want to raise the value, you'll get 2500. Similarly, if you want to lower the salary, you'll get 1500. But if you want it to be current, whatever it is, you'll get that value 2000 itself. Similarly, we can do it for area and we'll lower the salary from 4000 to 3500. Create a function named nameFactory, which accepts first name, last name, and returns an object with multiple functions. So let's go ahead, create a function. The function name is nameFactory. Does it accept anything? It accepts two things, first name and last name. It needs to return an object with these three functions. So we'll say return an object get full name. It is a function. Similarly, we need to set first name to a new value and we'll say set last name. What is the first full name is doing? Returns the full name of the person. So here we'll say return $, first name space $ last name. In second, what we are doing updates the first name. So it accepts a parameter. So we need to say, so accepts a parameter using which updates the first name and returns the updated full name. Similarly, it will happen here. So it will accept a parameter called first name. What we need to do, we need to update the value of first name to be equal to fn, and at last we just have to return this. Similarly, we'll do the same thing here. The only difference is here, instead of updating the first name, it will accept last name and will update last name. So in this way, we are done creating name factory. Execute it, call it like let area is equal to name factory. We are going to call it with two names, area and stack. Now, if we say area, it is an object with three methods. We can say area.get full name, call it area stack. Here again, we are saying set first name to something like John. Now, it returns John stack. But what if we change the last name? So we'll say set last name, and here we can say snow. It is saying fn is not defined. The reason because here we use ln and here we used fn. So there was a difference there. Let's fix it and try it again. So we created area. Next thing is get full name. Set first name to John. So we say John stack. Now we'll set last name to Snow. We get John Snow. So in this way we are done creating name factory. Let's move on to the last one. It's called create tag. So we have a function called create tag which accepts an HTML element name and returns another function. So we can just call it tag and say return another function. So we'll say return another function like this. The returned function accepts a string that is children. So we can say child and returns the children with a tag you passed. So if we look at example, you will understand it properly. What we need to do is we need to first create the element. So we'll say let element is equal to document.create element. We are going to create it using the name tag, and later on here we can just say element dot inner text is equal to child, and at last we just need to say return element. Now let's go ahead and call this. So refresh it, done, created. Let's just call this thing now. So we want to create a tag bold. So bold is b tag. Now we want to say bold hello world. So it is giving us HTML element. Similarly here when we do something like this, we can use the same function to do multiple things. Here we are using it for creating italics. So in this way we are done creating this. In this way we are done solving this exercise. I think it was fun solving all these different kind of problems using closure. So in all of these examples, we are using closure in some or the other way. You can see it here. We have a word story. So we have a variable story and we are using it inside these functions even after these functions being returned as an object. Same is the case with happening with other things. Here we implemented for each using closure. So it was really fun.